President Charles Murphy stood before the assembled representatives of both Earth and the galaxy, his words carrying across space to worlds that had never heard of New Terra colony until this moment. Behind him, massive displays showed the captured Zephyrian fleet and the intelligence that had been extracted from their databases. For 97 years, this colony has existed in secret, Murphy began, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. We were not hiding from humanity, we were preparing to defend it. Today, that preparation has proven successful beyond our most optimistic projections. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and profound. On dozens of worlds, populations that had lived in terror of Zephyrian expansion suddenly realized that the impossible had occurred. The empire that had seemed unstoppable had been defeated by a species most civilizations had barely heard of. Ambassador Nina Clark opened communication channels with shocked galactic representatives whose governments were scrambling to understand this new reality. The Galactic Council, which had maintained careful neutrality in the face of Zephyrian aggression, now faced the reality that a previously unknown human military force had fundamentally altered the balance of power. The New Terra colony offers immediate assistance to any species currently under threat from Zephyrian forces, Clark announced to the assembled diplomatic corps. We will share defensive technologies and tactical intelligence with all peaceful civilizations who request our aid. Admiral Marcus Kane sat in stunned silence as he reviewed reports from his own intelligence officers about what they had witnessed. Earth's military had considered itself the primary defender of human space, but they had just watched a secret colony defeat enemies that Earth could never have faced alone. How advanced are their capabilities compared to Earth's? Kane asked. His science officer, Captain Lisa Thompson. Thompson consulted her analysis of the colony's demonstrated technology. Sir, based on what we've observed, the colony's military capabilities are approximately 50 years ahead of our most advanced systems. Their adaptive ship designs alone represent breakthroughs that our best scientists haven't even theorized. The news spread through human space like wildfire. Earth's struggling outer colonies, which had been preparing for evacuation in the face of alien threats, suddenly learned that humanity possessed secret defensive capabilities that could protect them. Morale shifted from desperate fear to cautious hope as people realized they were not as vulnerable as they had believed. Chief Strategist Kevin Turner revealed the full scope of human preparation to the shocked galactic community. New Terra colony is not alone, he announced during a public broadcast that reached every major civilization. Hidden human settlements exist throughout the galaxy, each adapted to their local environment, each contributing to humanity's collective defensive capability. This revelation sent shockwaves through galactic politics. Intelligence services that had dismissed humanity as a minor species scrambled to identify the locations and capabilities of hidden human outposts. What they discovered was a network of settlements that had been quietly observing and preparing for decades. The Klingari Republic, which had been fighting a losing war against Zephyrian expansion for 10 years, immediately requested human assistance. Their ambassador, a proud warrior named Gektar, set aside centuries of his species' isolationist policies to address President Murphy directly. Humans of New Terra, Gektar said during the emergency galactic assembly, the Klingari have fought the Zephyrians with honor but without success. We request alliance with your forces to liberate our conquered territories. Similar requests came from dozens of other species. The Villani, whose homeworld had been captured 3 years earlier, offered to share their advanced sensor technology in exchange for human military support. The Coruscant Union provided detailed intelligence about Zephyrian slave facilities in their former territory. Dr. Helen Carter found herself leading the largest technology sharing program in galactic history. Species that had guarded their scientific secrets for millennia were suddenly eager to collaborate with humans who had proven capable of defeating the galaxy's greatest threat. The adaptive principles behind our ship designs can be applied to any technology, Carter explained to alien scientists who studied her work with amazement. The key insight is that defensive systems should learn and evolve rather than remain static. Engineer Matt Davis coordinated the modification of captured Zephyrian vessels into liberation ships. Each alien hull was fitted with human adaptive technology and crewed by volunteers from species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule. The former instruments of oppression became tools of freedom. Admiral Rachel Stone led the first liberation fleet toward Zephyrian territory 6 months after the initial victory. Her force included ships from 17 different species, all coordinated using human tactical doctrine and equipped with weapons designed specifically to disable rather than destroy. Remember, Stone addressed her fleet commanders, our goal is not to become the new galactic empire. Our goal is to eliminate empires entirely and restore freedom to conquered populations. The first target was a Zephyrian slave facility that held over 2 million beings from 7 different species. The human-led liberation fleet arrived to find the installation defended by forces that had been hastily reinforced after news of the Kepler 442 defeat reached Zephyrian command. Captain Betty Rodriguez led the boarding operations with teams that included liberated Zephyrian prisoners who had chosen to fight against their former empire. The psychological impact on defending forces was devastating as they faced opponents who knew their tactics, their technology, and their weaknesses better than they knew themselves. The liberation of the slave facility took less than 6 hours. 2 million beings who had been enslaved for decades found themselves free, protected by a coalition of species led by humans who asked for nothing in return except the promise to help liberate others. News of the successful liberation operation reached every corner of galactic civilization within days. The Zephyrian Empire, which had built its power on the belief that resistance was futile, suddenly faced rebellions on dozens of worlds as enslaved populations realized that help was coming. Admiral Kethvar, now cooperating fully with human intelligence, operations, provided crucial information about Zephyrian defensive strategies. The Empire's strength was built on fear, he explained to Commander Tony Walsh. Once that fear is broken, their control becomes impossible to maintain. The psychological collapse of Zephyrian authority accelerated as liberation fleets struck at slave facilities throughout their territory. Each successful operation freed thousands of beings and captured military assets that were immediately turned against their former masters. President Murphy addressed the galaxy once more as reports of successful liberation operations continued to arrive. Humanity did not seek galactic leadership, he said simply. We sought only to survive and protect those who could not protect themselves. Today, we have proven that no species must accept domination by another. The Galactic Council officially recognized the new Terra colony and its associated settlements as a major galactic power, granting humanity a permanent seat on the ruling body that had previously ignored Earth's existence. But more importantly, they adopted human principles of defensive cooperation as the foundation for a new galactic charter. Dr. Carter stood in her laboratory watching displays that showed liberated worlds throughout former Zephyrian territory. Each world was rebuilding according to its own cultural values, protected by defensive systems based on human adaptive technology, but controlled entirely by the liberated populations themselves. "We did it," her assistant said quietly. "We actually freed the galaxy." Carter shook her head with a slight smile. "We didn't free the galaxy. We just proved that freedom is possible when people work together to defend it." Admiral Stone returned to New Terra, with reports that the Zephyrian Empire had officially surrendered and agreed to release all enslaved populations under international supervision. The war that had threatened to consume galactic civilization had ended not with conquest, but with liberation. Kevin Turner compiled his final strategic assessment as the galaxy entered a new era of cooperative defense. "The hidden colonies served their purpose," he reported to the colonial leadership. "Humanity has emerged as a galactic power, but more importantly, we've established principles that will prevent any species from dominating others again." The secret was finally out, but it had revealed something far more important than hidden human settlements. It had shown that when threatened species worked together and planned carefully, even the most powerful empire could be defeated by those determined to remain free. Earth received detailed specifications for adaptive starship technology as the galaxy realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been superior weapons or military genius. It had been their ability to see long-term patterns, plan for distant threats, and work together across vast distances and decades of preparation while keeping their true capabilities hidden until the moment they were needed most. The New Terra colony had emerged from secrecy not as conquerors but as liberators, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Admiral Rachel Stone emerged from behind the gas giant with 47 warships that seemed to bend the rules of physics themselves. Her flagship, the New Terra, moved through space with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large, its hull shifting and adapting as different weapon systems came online. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensors tried to make sense of what they were detecting. The human ships appeared to be changing their basic structure in real time, growing new weapon ports and defensive systems as they moved into battle formation. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered. "No species has technology that advanced." His tactical officer was frantically running diagnostics on their sensor array. "Sir, the readings are accurate. The human vessels are using some kind of programmable matter technology. Their ships are literally rebuilding themselves for combat." Dr. Helen Carter monitored the battle from her laboratory deep within New Terra's crust. As the colony's chief scientist, she had spent 30 years developing the technology that was now shocking the galaxy's most feared military force. The adaptive ship designs were her crowning achievement, born from a simple human insight that other species had missed. "Humans always build tools that can be used for multiple purposes," Carter had explained to her engineering teams years ago. "Why should our spaceships be any different?" The result was vessels that could reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements. A cargo ship could become a weapons platform, a research vessel could transform into a command center, and every ship in the fleet could adapt its armor and weapons to counter whatever threats they faced. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Brooks coordinated the systematic dismantling of the Zephyrian fleet from his position aboard Admiral Stone's flagship. As the colony's top military tactician, he had studied every aspect of Zephyrian combat doctrine and identified their fundamental weakness. They relied on overwhelming superiority and had never learned to adapt when their standard tactics failed. "Target their command vessels first," Brooks ordered the fleet commanders. "Don't destroy them. Disable them. We want their crews to see what happens when they underestimate humanity." The human warships moved with deadly precision, their adaptive weapons, systems analyzing Zephyrian shield frequencies and adjusting their fire in real time. What should have been a simple energy beam became something far more sophisticated, a weapon that learned from each shot and became more effective with every subsequent attack. Admiral Kethvar's flagship shuddered as human weapons found weak points in his shields that shouldn't have existed. His engineering teams reported that the human attacks were somehow adapting to their defensive systems faster than the Zephyrians could compensate. "How are they doing this?" Kethvar demanded. "Our shields are based on technology that has protected the Empire for centuries." "Sir," his chief engineer reported, "the human weapons appear to be running thousands of different attack patterns simultaneously. They're testing our defenses and sharing information between their ships instantly. It's like fighting a single organism with dozens of bodies." That was exactly what the humans had created. Dr. Carter's breakthrough had not just been in adaptive ship design, but in linked intelligence systems that allowed the entire fleet to learn and respond as a unified force. Every discovery made by one ship was immediately shared with all the others. Captain Amy Foster's vessel, no longer pretending to be damaged, engaged 3 Zephyrian cruisers simultaneously. Her ship's hull flowed like liquid as it reconfigured itself to present different weapon systems to each enemy. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting what appeared to be 3 different ships at once. "Human vessels are demonstrating capabilities beyond our understanding," one of Kethvar's subordinate commanders reported over the fleet communications. "Request permission to withdraw and regroup." Kethvar stared at his tactical display as red warning indicators spread across his fleet positions. Ships that had never known defeat were being systematically disabled by opponents they had dismissed as primitive. But withdrawal was not an option. The Zephyrian Empire did not retreat from humans. "All vessels, concentrate fire on the largest human ship," Kethvar ordered. "If we can destroy their flagship, their coordination will collapse." 20 Zephyrian warships focused their combined firepower on Admiral Stone's vessel. Energy beams that could melt through asteroid cores struck the human ship with enough force to destroy a small moon. For a moment, Kethvar thought he had found the solution. Then the human flagship emerged from the attack completely undamaged, its hull gleaming as if it had just been polished. The concentrated fire that should have destroyed it had somehow been absorbed and redirected harmlessly into space. Dr. Carter smiled as she watched her energy distribution systems perform exactly as designed. The human ships didn't just adapt their weapons and structure, they could adapt their defense systems to absorb and redirect any form of attack. What the Zephyrians thought was destruction, the humans were using as an additional power source. "Energy absorption at 112% efficiency," Carter's assistant reported. "The Zephyrian attacks are actually making our ships stronger." This was the human advantage that no other species had achieved, the ability to turn any situation into an opportunity. Where other races saw problems, humans saw puzzles to be solved. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw challenges to overcome. Admiral Stone opened a communication channel to the Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Admiral Rachel Stone of the New Terra Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to order your ships to power down their weapons and prepare for boarding. Any vessel that continues to resist will be disabled and captured." Kethvar's response was a snarl of rage in his own language, followed by orders for his remaining ships to fight to the last soldier. The Zephyrian Empire had never surrendered to any species, and they would not start with humans. "Very well," Stone replied calmly. "All ships, begin capture operations. Remember, we want their vessels intact and their crews alive for questioning." What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Instead of destroying the Zephyrian ships, the humans systematically disabled them using precision strikes. That left hulls intact while destroying only weapons and engines. Boarding pods launched from the human vessels, carrying teams trained specifically for fighting in alien ship environments. Captain Betty Rodriguez led the first boarding team onto Admiral Kethvar's flagship. Her soldiers moved through the alien corridors with confidence that came from years of studying Zephyrian ship designs and psychology. They knew exactly where to find critical systems and how to neutralize alien crew members without causing unnecessary casualties. The Zephyrians, who had conquered dozens of species, found themselves being conquered by opponents who seemed to understand their technology better than they did themselves. Every defensive measure they tried had already been anticipated and countered by human preparations. Admiral Kethvar made his final stand on his own bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of instruments that had been precisely destroyed by human weapons. As Captain Rodriguez and her team entered the command center, he realized that this defeat was unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. How? Was all he managed to say as human soldiers secured his bridge crew with efficiency that spoke of extensive preparation. Rodriguez looked at the defeated alien commander with something that might have been pity. "Admiral, you made the same mistake that everyone makes about humanity. You assumed that being peaceful meant being weak. You thought that having smaller territory meant having less capability. You never considered what humans might accomplish if we had time to prepare for threats like you." As the last Zephyrian resistance collapsed, engineer Matt Davis began his most important task: extracting information from the captured alien ships. The humans had not just won a battle, they had captured an entire enemy fleet intact, complete with military databases, strategic plans, and intelligence about Zephyrian capabilities throughout the galaxy. The war that the Zephyrian Empire thought they were starting had ended before they realized it had begun, and humanity had emerged as a power that would reshape the balance of galactic civilization. Colony Defense Commander Tony Walsh stood in the Central Command Center watching displays that showed something no military strategist had ever imagined possible. 3 complete Zephyrian battle groups representing the most feared military force in the galaxy had been systematically captured without the loss of a single human life. The boarding operations continued across dozens of alien vessels as Captain Betty Rodriguez's teams moved through ship after ship with practiced efficiency. Each Zephyrian crew found themselves facing human soldiers who seemed to know their ship layouts better than they did, who anticipated their defensive tactics, and who moved with the confidence of people who had planned for this exact scenario. Rodriguez led her squad through the corridors of a Zephyrian heavy cruiser, their adaptive armor automatically adjusting to the alien atmosphere and gravity. The human soldiers carried weapons designed specifically for fighting in enclosed spaces against Zephyrian physiology, devices that could disable without killing and capture without destroying valuable intelligence. "Deck 7 secured," Rodriguez reported to Commander Walsh. "Engineering section is intact, and we've captured their entire technical staff alive. The alien crew is cooperative once they realize resistance is futile." This was perhaps the most shocking aspect of the human victory. The Zephyrians, who had built their empire on the principle that strength commanded respect, found themselves genuinely impressed by human capabilities. For the first time in their species' history, they were facing opponents they could acknowledge as superior. Admiral Kethvar sat in his own command chair, now secured with human restraints, watching his captors work with an efficiency that bordered on artistry. Human technicians were already interfacing with his ship's computers, extracting information with tools that seemed designed specifically for Zephyrian technology. "Your people prepared for this battle," Kethvar said to the human officer supervising his bridge. "This was not a fortunate accident. You knew we were coming." Lieutenant Colonel Steve Brooks nodded as he reviewed the tactical data being extracted from the alien flagship. "Admiral, we've known about the Zephyrian Empire for 30 years. We've been monitoring your communications, studying your tactics, and preparing for the day when your expansion would threaten human space." The scope of human preparation was becoming clear as engineer Matt Davis led teams through each captured vessel. The humans had not simply built better weapons and ships, they had created an intelligence network that spanned half the galaxy. Every Zephyrian military action for decades had been observed and analyzed by human agents who had remained completely undetected. "Sir," Davis reported to Commander Walsh, "we've accessed their central military database. The intelligence hall is beyond anything we hoped for. Ship designs, base locations, fleet movements, even their long-term strategic plans for the next 50 years. Walsh studied the incoming data with growing amazement. The Zephyrian Empire had been planning a systematic conquest of all known intelligent species, with human space marked for invasion within the next 5 years. Earth and its colonies had been designated as a practice target for new Zephyrian military technologies. Dr. Helen Carter analyzed the captured Zephyrian technology from her laboratory and found herself both impressed and disappointed. The aliens had created powerful weapons and effective ships, but their designs showed no real innovation for centuries. They had become so successful with their basic approach that they had stopped trying to improve. Their technology is sophisticated, but stagnant, Carter explained to the command staff. They perfected a military doctrine and then never felt the need to advance beyond it. Meanwhile, we've spent decades specifically developing counters to their capabilities. This revealed the fundamental difference between human and Zephyrian military philosophy. The aliens had achieved dominance and maintained it through overwhelming force applied consistently. Humans had achieved security through constant adaptation and improvement, driven by the knowledge that they might face superior opponents. Captain Amy Foster was coordinating the capture of the Zephyrian supply ships when she discovered something that changed their understanding of the enemy empire. Hidden in the logistics databases were detailed records of conquered species, including their current status under Zephyrian rule. "Commander Walsh," Foster reported, "the Zephyrians haven't been destroying the species they conquer. They've been enslaving them and using them as forced labor throughout their empire. There are millions of beings from dozens of species working in Zephyrian facilities across their territory. This information transformed the captured intelligence from a tactical advantage into a moral imperative. The human colony now possessed not just the locations of Zephyrian military installations, but detailed maps of slave labor camps and conquered populations that had been waiting decades for liberation. Admiral Rachel Stone convened an emergency meeting of the colony's leadership to discuss their next steps. The successful capture of the Zephyrian fleet had given humanity capabilities they had never imagined possessing, but it had also revealed responsibilities they could not ignore. "We have the strategic intelligence to cripple the Zephyrian Empire," Stone reported to the assembled leaders. "Their military codes, base locations, fleet positions, and supply routes are all in our hands. But more importantly, we now know where they're holding millions of enslaved beings from conquered worlds." Director Paul Harrison studied the tactical displays showing Zephyrian territory throughout the galaxy. The Empire was vast and powerful, but the captured intelligence revealed that it was also stretched thin and dependent on predictable logistics that human forces could disrupt. How long would it take to mount rescue operations for the enslaved populations? Harrison asked his military commanders. Commander Walsh consulted with his tactical staff before responding. With the intelligence we've captured, we could coordinate simultaneous strikes on major slave facilities within 6 months. But, sir, that would mean revealing our capabilities to the entire galaxy. Harrison nodded slowly. The colony had remained hidden for nearly a century, but the successful defeat of the Zephyrian fleet meant that secrecy was no longer possible. The question now was whether humanity would use their revealed strength purely for defense or accept the larger responsibility of galactic liberation. Admiral Kethvar, still monitoring human activities from his position as a prisoner, began to understand something that filled him with a mixture of fear and respect. The humans had not captured his fleet simply to protect themselves. They were planning something far more ambitious and dangerous than mere self-defense. "You intend to attack the Empire directly," Kethvar said to Brooks during one of their interrogation sessions. "You believe you can defeat forces that have conquered half the galaxy." Brooks looked at the alien admiral with calm confidence. "Admiral, we've already defeated the forces that conquered half the galaxy. Your fleet represented the Empire's most advanced military capabilities, and you're now prisoners of war. The question isn't whether we can defeat the Zephyrian Empire. The question is how quickly we can liberate the beings you've enslaved." The captured Zephyrian crews began to realize that they had not simply lost a battle. They had encountered a species that approached warfare from a completely different perspective. Where Zephyrians fought for dominance and conquest, humans fought for principles and protection of others. Engineer Davis completed his analysis of the captured ships and presented his findings to the command staff. These vessels can be modified to serve as the core of a liberation fleet. With our adaptive technology integrated into Zephyrian hull designs, we could create ships that are superior to anything else in the galaxy. The final revelation came when Dr. Carter analyzed the Empire's central database and discovered the full scope of Zephyrian activities. The aliens had not just been conquering territory. They had been systematically destroying the scientific and cultural achievements of every species they encountered. "They're not just enslaving populations," Carter reported grimly. "They're erasing entire civilizations. Libraries, laboratories, art, music, literature, everything that makes a species unique is being destroyed. If we don't act, dozens of cultures will be lost forever." Commander Walsh looked around the command center at displays showing the locations of threatened worlds throughout Zephyrian space. The colony had planned for defense against invasion, but they now faced a choice that would define humanity's role in galactic civilization. "All right," Walsh said quietly. "We've proven that humans can defend ourselves. Now let's prove that we can defend others as well." The impossible victory over the Zephyrian fleet was complete, but it was only the beginning of something far larger. Humanity was about to emerge as a galactic power dedicated not to conquest, but to liberation, and the universe would never be the same. Commander Jake Phillips watched the approaching Zephyrian fleet through the tactical display in his command center deep beneath New Terra's surface. 3 massive battle groups moved through space with the confidence of predators who had never met serious resistance. Admiral Kethvar's flagship led the formation, its dark hull bristling with weapons that had reduced countless worlds to ash. Phillips had studied Zephyrian tactics for 15 years, analyzing every battle report that reached human space. The aliens followed the same pattern every time. Overwhelming force applied quickly to break enemy morale, followed by systematic destruction of all resistance. They had perfected this approach across dozens of conquered systems. Sir, the Zephyrian fleet is maintaining standard attack formation, reported Captain Amy Foster from her position at the communications console. They're not even bothering to scan for defensive installations. Phillips nodded grimly. The Zephyrians' arrogance would be their weakness today. They saw a human colony and assumed they knew exactly what they were facing. Desperate civilians, with outdated weapons and no real military experience. Begin Phase 1, Phillips ordered. All civilian transports are to appear panicked and disorganized. Make it look like we're trying to evacuate but don't have enough ships. Across the system, the carefully orchestrated performance began. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly seemed to lose coordination. Civilian vessels broadcast frantic distress calls while appearing to collide with each other in their haste to escape. The orbital platforms around New Terra dimmed their lights and reduced their energy signatures to barely detectable levels. Admiral Kethvar watched the chaos through his own sensors and felt the familiar satisfaction of another easy conquest. The humans were behaving exactly as expected. Panic, confusion, and the pathetic hope that some of them might escape if they ran fast enough. Increase speed to attack velocity, Kethvar ordered his fleet commanders. The humans are fleeing toward their inner planets. We will pursue and destroy them before they can establish any meaningful defense. The Zephyrian fleet accelerated through the outer system, their massive ships cutting through space like dark blades. Behind them, they left the apparent wreckage of human cargo vessels that had been too slow to escape. The aliens never bothered to scan the debris closely enough to realize it was all carefully constructed fake ships. Captain Foster maintained her role perfectly as she led a group of colony ships in apparent retreat toward the asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets. Her vessels sparked and trailed vapor as if their engines were failing, and she broadcast increasingly desperate requests for assistance from any Earth forces in the area. Unknown alien vessels, this is Captain Amy Foster of the New Terra colony, she transmitted on all frequencies. We are civilians with limited defensive capability. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. Admiral Kethvar laughed at the pathetic human transmission. In his language, he ordered his communications officer to respond with the standard surrender demand, though he had no intention of accepting surrender. The Zephyrian Empire did not take prisoners from species they considered inferior. Human vessel, you will immediately cease all movement and prepare to be destroyed. The alien message came back in broken but understandable human language. Resistance is futile. Your species lacks the strength to oppose the Zephyrian Empire. Onderdash exchanged glances with her tactical officer, Lieutenant Carl Mitchell. Both of them had trained for this moment since childhood, studying every aspect of Zephyrian psychology and military doctrine. The aliens' predictable response confirmed that they were following their standard pattern exactly. They're taking the bait, Mitchell reported quietly. All three battle groups are pursuing us into the belt. They're maintaining tight formation and haven't launched any scout craft. Phillips watched from his command center as the Zephyrian fleet entered the asteroid field in pursuit of the fleeing human ships. The aliens were so focused on their prey that they failed to notice the subtle changes in the asteroids around them. Activate Defensive Grid Section 1, Phillips ordered. Throughout the asteroid belt, rocks that had looked natural for decades suddenly came alive with energy. Hidden within the largest asteroids were weapons platforms that had been built over 30 years of careful preparation. But these were not ordinary defensive installations. The first surprise came when energy beams lanced out from asteroids that the Zephyrians had dismissed as harmless space debris. The beams struck with pinpoint accuracy, targeting the alien ship's weapon systems rather than their main hulls. This was not meant to be a quick victory, but a careful demonstration. Admiral Keth Var's flagship shuddered as several secondary weapon arrays were cleanly destroyed. Around him, his bridge crew scrambled to understand how humans could have built weapons capable of penetrating Zephyrian shields. "Damage report," Keth Var snarled at his tactical officer. "Sir, we've lost 30% of our port weapons grid," the officer replied, his voice filled with confusion. "The human weapons are using some kind of phase technology that bypasses our standard defensive systems." Keth Var felt a moment of uncertainty that he quickly pushed aside. Humans were clever, he admitted, but cleverness meant nothing against superior firepower. "All ships, target the source of enemy fire. Destroy those asteroids." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with their main weapons, massive energy cannons that could crack a planet's crust. The targeted asteroids exploded in brilliant flashes, and for a moment Keth Var thought the human resistance had been eliminated. Then the real surprise began. As the first line of hidden platforms was destroyed, they revealed that they had been nothing but decoys. The real weapons emerged from deeper within the asteroid field, and these were unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever faced. Captain Foster's ship suddenly stopped its apparent retreat and began moving with deadly precision. The vessel that had seemed damaged and desperate revealed itself to be perfectly functional and armed with weapons that defied Zephyrian understanding of human technology. "Unknown alien commander," Foster broadcast, her voice now calm and confident. "You have entered sovereign human space and threatened civilian populations. You are hereby ordered to surrender your vessels and submit to detention." Admiral Keth Var stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The fleeing human ships had turned to face his fleet, and their energy signatures indicated weapons and defensive systems that should not have been possible for such a primitive species. "Sir, his sensor officer reported with growing alarm. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid field. The humans have weapons platforms hidden everywhere, and they're all powering up simultaneously." For the first time in his military career, Keth Var felt something he had never experienced in battle: fear. The humans had not been fleeing at all. They had been leading his entire fleet into a carefully prepared trap, and now that trap was closing around them. Commander Phillips smiled as he watched the Zephyrian formation begin to lose its coordinated advance. The aliens were finally realizing that they were not hunters but prey, and the psychological impact was already disrupting their tactical discipline. "Phase 2 is complete," he announced to his command staff. "The enemy is exactly where we want them. Signal Admiral Stone to begin the final phase." In the shadow of the system's gas giant, ships that had been hidden for hours began to move. These were not colony vessels or converted civilian craft. These were warships designed specifically to fight the Zephyrian Empire, and they represented decades of human innovation focused on a single goal, proving that humanity would never again be the victim of an alien invasion. The trap was sprung, and Admiral Keth Var was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt and plan for threats that others couldn't even imagine. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the impossible data on his screen. The deep space probe had been sending regular reports for 3 years, mapping empty sectors beyond the outer rim. But this latest transmission made no sense. The probe had detected massive energy signatures in the Kepler 442 system, a place that should have been nothing but dead rock and cold space. Kane rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the data again. The readings showed industrial activity on a scale that rivaled Earth's largest shipyards. That was impossible. No human colony existed in that sector. The official record showed nothing but failed survey missions and abandoned mining claims. Captain Lisa Thompson approached his command chair with a worried expression. She had been his science officer for 8 years, and Kane trusted her judgment more than anyone else on his crew. Thompson handed him a detailed analysis of the probe's findings. "Sir, we've run the data through every filter we have," Thompson said quietly. "The signatures are definitely human technology, but they're using power levels we've never seen before. The energy output suggests a population in the millions." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. Earth's government kept careful records of every human settlement beyond the home system. The outer colonies were struggling to maintain basic life. Support and most communication with the frontier had been lost during the resource wars 50 years ago. No colony could have grown to this size without Earth knowing about it. "How long would it take to reach that system?" Kane asked. 6 days at maximum jump speed," Thompson replied. "But sir, if there really is a human colony out there, why haven't they made contact, and how did they develop technology that advanced?" Kane stared at the star charts displaying the location of Kepler 442. Something about this situation felt wrong, but he couldn't ignore the possibility that thousands of humans might need help. Earth had lost contact with dozens of colonies during the wars, and rescue missions had become impossible as resources dwindled. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure," Kane ordered. "Send word to Earth Command that we're investigating unusual readings in Sector 7. Don't mention the energy signatures yet." 3 days later, Kane's small fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The system buzzed with activity that made Earth's busiest trade routes look empty. Massive orbital platforms surrounded 3 different planets, connected by streams of cargo ships moving in perfect formation. The 4th planet showed clear signs of terraforming, with blue oceans and green continents visible from space. Kane's communications officer, Lieutenant Jake Miller, turned toward him with wide eyes. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's using old Earth military codes, but the encryption is more advanced than anything we have." "Put it through," Kane said, his voice barely steady. The main screen flickered to life, showing a woman in her 40s with short brown hair and calm green eyes. She wore a uniform that looked similar to Earth military dress, but with subtle differences that suggested decades of independent development. "Welcome to New Terra Colony," the woman said with a slight smile. "I'm Administrator Lisa Ward. We've been monitoring your approach for the past hour. You're from Earth, aren't you?" Kane struggled to find his voice. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Force. How long has this colony been here? Why haven't you made contact with Earth?" Ward's expression grew more serious. "Admiral, we've been here for 97 years. As for contact with Earth, well, that's a complicated story. Perhaps you'd like to come down to the surface. Director Paul Harrison is eager to meet representatives from the home world." Within hours, Kane found himself in a transport shuttle, descending toward New Terra's surface. The planet below looked nothing like the struggling frontier worlds he knew. Cities stretched across continents, connected by transportation networks that moved with clockwork precision. Forests and farmland covered vast areas, suggesting a completely stable ecosystem. The shuttle landed at a spaceport that could have accommodated Earth's entire merchant fleet. Kane and his small team were greeted by Director Harrison, a tall man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Admiral Kane," Harrison said, extending his hand. "Welcome to what your government probably considers a myth. Please walk with me. There's much you need to understand." As they toured the colony's central district, Kane felt increasingly overwhelmed. The technology he saw should not have been possible for an isolated human settlement. Vehicles moved. Without visible engines, buildings seemed to generate their own power, and the people they passed looked healthy and confident in a way that Earth's citizens hadn't for generations. "How is this possible?" Kane finally asked. "Earth's records show this system was surveyed and abandoned as unsuitable for colonization." Harrison stopped walking and turned to face him. "Admiral, what Earth's records don't show is that a group of military engineers and scientists left during the resource wars. They took advanced prototype technology and enough resources to establish a permanent settlement. The official story was that their ships were lost in a navigation accident." "You're saying this colony was founded by deserters?" Kane asked, trying to keep judgment out of his voice. "Not deserters," Harrison replied firmly. "Visionaries. They saw what the resource wars were doing to humanity and decided to preserve our species' future in a place where political conflicts couldn't reach. They were right. While Earth struggled to maintain basic civilization, we've had nearly a century to develop and grow." Kane looked around at the bustling streets filled with people who seemed to have never known scarcity or fear. "But why maintain the secret? Why let Earth think you were dead?" "Because we knew this day would come," Harrison said quietly. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about the alien empires, the wars between species, and the threats heading toward human space. Earth isn't ready for what's coming, but we are." Before Kane could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the city. People moved quickly but without panic toward designated areas, their actions coordinated like a well-rehearsed drill. Harrison's expression grew grim as he checked a small device on his wrist. "Admiral, it seems our conversation will have to wait. We have visitors approaching the system, and they're not friendly." "What kind of visitors?" Kane asked, but he already suspected the answer. "Zephyrian Empire scouts," Harrison replied. 3 ships, probably advance elements for a larger force. They've been expanding into this sector for months, enslaving or destroying every species they encounter." Kane felt his blood run cold. The Zephyrian Empire was legendary for its brutality. Their fleets had conquered entire star systems, and no species had ever successfully resisted their advance. Earth's intelligence suggested that human space would be their next target. "We need to evacuate immediately," Kane said. "My ships can. Take as many people as possible back to Earth." Harrison looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Admiral, you don't understand. We're not evacuating. We've been preparing for this moment for 30 years. The Zephyrians are about to discover that humanity is not the weak, scattered species they believe us to be." As Kane tried to process this statement, he saw something that changed his understanding of everything. In the distance, what he had thought were civilian buildings began to shift and reconfigure themselves. The peaceful colony was transforming into something else entirely, revealing capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. The secret was finally out, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity could accomplish when they had time to prepare.